Okay, let's dive straight into some pretty rocky diplomatic waters today.
Yeah, definitely.
We're looking at an article from Al Jazeera reporting on a really well-pointed protest from Cuba's Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
hmm And it's aimed directly at the head of the U.S. mission in Havana, Michael Hammer.
Right. And the core of it, like the article explains, is Cuba's accusation. They've called his behavior unfriendly and meddling.
That's putting it mildly. The statement actually goes further, accusing him of some, pretty serious stuff.
Like what specifically?
Well, inciting Cuban citizens to commit extremely serious criminal acts, attacking the constitutional order, or even encouraging them to act against the authorities.
Wow. Or demonstrate for a, quote, hostile foreign power. That's strong language.
It is. And Cuba was quick to add that diplomatic immunity isn't some kind of free pass.
Right, not a cover for actions against their sovereignty and internal order, as they put it.
Exactly. So this isn't just a minor spat.
Yeah. No, definitely not. The article frames this whole confrontation as the latest indication of increasingly rocky relations between Cuba and the U.S.
Right. And, to understand why these tensions seem to be rising now, we really have to look at the history this report touches on.
Yeah, the historical backdrop. Diplomatic ties have been, well, pretty icy for decades, haven't they? Going back to the Cold War, the Cuban Revolution.
For sure, the U.S. imposed trade restrictions, backed efforts against the communist government. It's a long, long history.
A very long shadow. But the article also points out there have been moments, periods where things seem to ease up a bit.
Yeah, particularly under Democratic administrations. It mentions President Obama's attempt, remember, back in
To
2016.
normalize relations, yeah.
And even more recently, this year, under President Biden, Cuba was actually taken off the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism back in January.
Which the article really highlights as a significant point because, well, it tells us that changed almost immediately with the second Trump term.
Instantly. The report notes that right when he took office, January 20th, President Trump reversed course again. Cuba back on the terrorism list that very same day.
Wow, that same day.
Yeah. And the report kind of underscores this shift by mentioning that Trump's cabinet includes officials known for a hardline stance, specifically naming Marco Rubio.
Okay, so the situation we're seeing now, this sharp protest against the U.S. diplomat, it's happening against this backdrop. You've got the history, these brief thaws, and then this really rapid policy reversal right at the start of the new administration.
Exactly.
All right, let's really unpack this article then. See what specific events and actions it says are, driving this renewed friction.
Well, what's really interesting is the detail the article gives about Cuba's specific complaint against Hammer. It wasn't just general meddling accusations.
Oh.
No, the Cuban Foreign Ministry specifically accused him of public and insulting manipulation. And this related to a visit he made to the tomb of José Martí, the 19th century national hero.
Ah, yes, I remember reading that part. The U.S. Embassy posted a video of the visit, right?
And the voiceover used a quote from Martí, something like, "Respect for the freedom and thoughts of others is my passion. If I die or am killed, it will be for that."
Okay. And how was that seen?
Well, according to the report, critics saw highlighting that particular quote in a U.S. Embassy video as sort of an implied endorsement of dissent on the island.
So Cuba's viewing even symbolic actions like that through a lens of, like, deliberate provocation, hostile intent.
And it certainly seems that way, as they put it, attacking the constitutional order. The article suggests constitutional order here basically means challenging the whole structure and legitimacy of the Cuban government itself.
Got it. And the report kind of connects this specific reprimand to a broader pattern, right? Describing it as ramping up pressure under this new administration.
Exactly. This is where the article suggests a return to what they call maximum pressure tactics. It points to several recent actions by the U.S. government.
Like what? What actions?
Well, like back in February, the article notes the administration announced it would start yanking visas.
Yanking visas. For whom?
For anyone working with Cuba's medical system abroad, the program that sends thousands of healthcare workers out, especially in the Caribbean.
Oh, right. That's a big deal for Cuba, isn't it? A significant source of revenue.
Huge. And the article presents the two sides. Critics like Trump and Rubio, according to the report, claim it's basically forced labor that just enriches the Cuban government.
While Havana denies that completely.
Right. So it's a direct hit on a key Cuban program. But the U.S. frames it as targeting an exploitative system.
Okay, that definitely sounds like a major point of friction. What else does the article highlight? Any other actions?
Yeah, then moving into April, the article discusses the U.S. condemning Cuba for rearresting a group of dissidents.
Okay, and the report names some prominent figures, right? Jose Daniel Ferrer, Felix Navarro.
Hmm. And the background there, according to the article, is pretty complex. Cuba had apparently agreed to release Ferrer and Navarro earlier this year.
As part of a deal.
Yeah, brokered by the Vatican, the article says. Cuba was supposed to release around 553 prisoners, many involved in anti-government protests.
And in return,
the understanding, as reported, was that the U.S. was supposed to ease sanctions. But the article states pretty clearly that sanctions relief never actually happened.
oh. So from the Cuban perspective described in the report, they released prisoners, the U.S. didn't hold up its end on sanctions, and then the U.S. condemned them for rearresting some of those same people later.
That's the picture the report paints. A cycle of action, unmet expectations, leading right back to tension.
Definitely sounds like it. Was there anything else more recently?
Yes, another significant measure just this month, according to the report.
Which was?
The U.S. State Department determined that Cuba did not fully cooperate with U.S. counterterrorism efforts in 2024.
Ah, the counterterrorism designation.
Exactly. The State Department, again with figures like Rubio involved, accused Cuba of harboring 11 fugitives, some apparently facing terrorism charges in the U.S.
And the statement cited says Cuba wasn't willing to discuss returning them.
That's what the report indicates, yeah. The regime made it clear they weren't willing to talk about their return.
Okay, and what's the consequence of that designation, the not fully cooperating label?
Well, as the article lays it out, Cuba gets labeled under the Arms Export Control Act.
Meaning?
Practically speaking, it limits Cuba's ability to buy weapons and other defense stuff from the U.S. And the report adds, Diplomat Hammer had recently hinted that new sanctions might even be on the way.
So the picture this article paints is really one of escalating U.S. actions targeting the economy, dissidents, security concerns, all building up to Cuba's really strong protest against Hammer.
Pretty much, yeah. A series of moves.
So what was the U.S. response to that reprimand? According to this article, did they back down at all?
Not really, no. The report says the State Department indicated it was undeterred by Cuba's protests.
Undeterred.
Yeah. They basically said they'd keep supporting dissidents against what they called Cuba's malign influence.
So the article suggests absolutely no sign of backing down from the U.S. side?
Not at all. The report presents this dynamic, increasing U.S. pressure through these specific policies and designations, and Cuba pushing back hard with diplomatic protests, accusing the U.S. of interference, pointing to specific things U.S. officials like Hammer did.
It sounds like, based on the article, a multi-pronged pressure campaign hitting the economy, human rights, security.
Yeah, it suggests a comprehensive approach, not just isolated incidents, targeting different pillars, you could say.
Okay, let's try and pull this all together for you based purely on this Al Jazeera article we've been digging into.
Right.
This deep dive shows the current state of U.S.-Cuba relations isn't just, generally bad. It's marked by these specific escalating actions and reactions that the report details.
We saw Cuba's specific complaints against diplomat Michael Hammer, that unfriendly and meddling behavior, inciting criminal acts, attacking the constitutional order, encouraging dissent.
And that public and insulting manipulation charge about the Jose Marti video?
Exactly. And we place that within the report's context, that long history of strain, those brief easing periods under Obama and Biden.
Starkly contrasted, as the article points out, with the immediate return to pressure under President Trump's second term.
Yeah. And the article details those recent maximum pressure actions, yanking the visas for medical workers framed by critics like Trump and Rubio as forced labor.
Condemning Cuba for rearresting Ferrer and Navarro after that Vatican deal reportedly fell apart over sanctions relief.
Right. And then that designation of Cuba as not fully cooperating with U.S. counterterrorism efforts in 2024 because of the alleged fugitives, leading to the Arms Export Control Act limits.
And finally, the article tells us the U.S. State Department's reaction to Cuba's protest about Hammer was simply undeterred. They'll continue supporting dissidents against Cuba's malign influence.
Yeah, no pullback indicated there.
So what does this all mean for you as you try to sort through this complex relationship? This article really highlights how specific diplomatic moves and policy shifts, like the terrorism list designation or the visa changes, they fit into this long pattern, this history of tension and cycles of pressure and attempted normalization.
It also shows how actions that might seem almost symbolic, like a diplomat's visit and a quote they use, can be seen as deeply provocative within this really fraught relationship described by the report.
Right. So here's something to think about, based only on what this article presents. Given it states the U.S. is undeterred and Cuba has issued such a strong specific reprimand against the diplomat, What does this particular confrontation suggest about the likely path forward for U.S.-Cuba relations as described right here in this report?
Yeah, something to consider based on the information we've unpacked today.